If you're a police officer and you beat a man to death, but he dies in the hospital later, can you get away with it by saying that it was the hospital's fault? Apparently, that's what Officer Ramos is trying to do. His lawyer is claiming that it was the medics at St. Jude Medical Center that treated Kelly Thomas, the 37-year-old homeless schizophrenic who was killed by police officers just last year. He's trying to claim that it wasn't his fault that Kelly Thomas died. It was the fact that he didn't get adequate medical attention. So let me just get this straight for you here. If I beat someone in such a way that it causes them to be about to die if they don't get medical attention, and then because the medical attention isn't there, then it's not my fault that they were killed. Right, okay. This is Officer Ramos of the Fullerton Police Department, and this is a case we covered when it happened last year on the TV show, and I'm really glad that we're able to do this follow-up now thanks to Infowars.com. This happened in Fullerton, California, and they're just going to trial now. And it turns out that there is surveillance video camera footage of the attempt or of the attack. The video begins with officers forcing an unlawful backpack search, a familiar tactic that is becoming a normality. Officer Ramos presents his request with the guise of wanting to get on with his day. Quote, "We just got to figure out your name so we can get out of here and go about our business. That's all." 3 minutes into the video, it's evident Ramos was just looking for an excuse to start a fight. Officer Ramos can be heard muttering obscenities to Thomas while putting on latex gloves.
No, keep my fist. Yeah, what about him?
There's this weird scene where the officer detains him and sits him down and says, "Now stick your feet out in front of you," as in extend your legs. "Now put your hands on your knees." And he has to lean back on this weird park bench to stick his feet out. And he's obviously confused.
Put your hands on your fucking knees. Put your feet out in front of you.
Well, which one is it, dude?
Both.
I can't do both.
Well, you're gonna have to do it real quick.
You can hear on the video him screaming, and I remember when we covered the report, you could hear, we reported that he was calling for his father, who was a former officer himself, and you can hear him screaming, "Dad, Dad," as he's getting beaten now by 6, 7 police officers that have come to the scene. There's a pool of blood on the ground from the beating. The officers that come, this is what really is sick about the police department here and the mentality of law enforcement in the United States, that when cops show up to respond to an altercation and it's a cop beating up a homeless man, trying to subdue him, and he does, to be fair, it does seem that he is forcibly resisting arrest, although at no point hostile towards the officers. But he says he's trying to get his hands behind his back, and there are, at this point, 3 or 4 officers already on top of him, and Officer Ramos is saying, "Get your hands behind your back, get your hands behind your back." And he says, okay, I'm sorry. And Kelly Thomas is apologizing over and over again, saying, I'm sorry. And there are 6 officers around him then while they're trying to get him handcuffed. And I can't tell from the video. It's impossible from the angle if they have him handcuffed or not at this point, but they're still beating him. And I don't care how strong someone is. If you're a police officer and you have 3 guys helping you out and you can't get a guy's hands behind his back to cuff him, and so you just keep beating the shit out of him until he's dead in a hospital, that doesn't really cut it. But the fact is that these officers that showed up didn't assess the situation beyond, oh, it's a cop beating someone else up, he must be a threat, let's help beat him up. And that's the other officers that come to the scene don't come in and rush down and get on top of him and properly subdue him with force to put his hands behind his back and handcuff him. No, they help Officer Ramos beating him. They're kicking him, kneeing him, and that's what's so fucked up here. There are only 2 officers that are being charged. Officer Ramos and Ciccinelli. They also tasered multiple times tasered him, and they couldn't get him handcuffed, so they had to keep beating him. I mean, the idea of tasers is that you can cause someone without causing damage to drop to their knees, to give up resistance because of the overwhelming pain. And it works. I can tell you, I've been tasered. It might not be something that freaks you out or is overwhelming pain, but it's overwhelming enough that you can't really do anything else while you're being tasered. Except maybe scream and struggle spastically. So what happened? He was in a coma for 5 days before he died in a hospital. And I think it's important to call attention to this story and stories like this, because there is an increasing trend in police abusing their powers. And it happens at the cultural level. It's not just at the systemic level. It's not just because of the law, although that's the premise for it. The reason it happens is the culture, that it's considered acceptable, and police are generally not held accountable for their actions. So that's why I'm really glad that this case is going to trial, that this case is hopefully going to get some accountability for the officers involved. But the excuse, Ramos's lawyer is claiming it was the medics at St. Jude Medical Center that treated Thomas that were ultimately responsible for his death, right? It couldn't be that ordeal and that beating that we put him through that put him in the hospital in the first place. It was the hospital workers that caused his death. However, Dr. Michael Lakawa, a chief trauma surgeon at UCI, where Thomas was later transferred under questioning, stated that St. Jude's did everything right. And he acknowledged that doctors at St. Jude's had informed him about the difficulty of inserting a breathing tube into Thomas's mouth necessary to deter low levels of oxygen in the blood. Although he testified prior to viewing the video, after seeing it, Lakawa could see why, under the weight of the officers on top of him, Thomas's brain was starving for oxygen. Fucking sick shit. We'll be following this, and I hope they throw the book at these cops, for lack of a better term to describe what I would want to see happen to them. I mean, really, what should have happened is that an armed citizen, if they had witnessed the entire proceeding, should have shot those cops while it was happening. Yeah. And I don't think that's going to happen. But really, in a just world, if there was someone there who was armed, who cared about justice, who wanted to save this man's life, those cops wouldn't be on trial after unpaid or paid leave, whatever it was they got for this incident. And they would have been shot right there. That would have been the end of it. And that would have been justice for Kelly Thomas, who might be alive today if the American culture of law enforcement was not one in which we abdicated our responsibility to look out for each other and provide for the public safety, and instead institutionalized this sick, perverse government that hires thugs to, well, control, kill, and beat us into submission rather than actually provide for the public safety.